Hi there, I'm Zara. How are you doing today? So I decided I wanted to use the research I'd previously done with the other CLs to look at how historically accurate the names of the other Black Butler characters were. I identified 81 characters, and I'm going to go through each of them with you and explain why they're historically accurate and why they're not historically accurate. And I've basically estimated that this is going to take about 12 videos. So you're actually going to see me in a change of clothes every now and then. Yes, which is not normal with some of my episode things. So I've mostly used the list of the top 200 popular Victorian names from 1850s to 1900s. I'm not going to include any of the characters that are Grim Reapers, demons, angels, or any people not from England. I don't mean to sound xenophobic there, but I'm just trying to focus on England because I have the data for England. I don't have any data for like Germany or anything, so I don't know what the popular names in Germany were at the time. And similarly with Japan, there's also a couple of characters that I think, when I looked at their names, I thought they were from Japan, so I then took them off the list. And like Tanaka, it doesn't go into Tanaka's details of his background. So I just decided he was Japanese because that seems a very popular name in Japan when I was researching it, and it just wouldn't be a Victorian name used. So when we're talking about popular names, the list of the 200 popular Victorian names is very important because popular names were a lot more significant in Victorian times. For example, the name William in 1990 was given to around 50,000 boys, whereas it's still very popular today, but in the whole English population, there are 50,000 males called William. So you can see there is a big difference between when a name was popular in Victorian times to when it's popular now. And you've got to also consider there was even a smaller population then in Victorian times. So for a name to be more popular then, there was a high proportion of the population also thinking that name was very popular at the time. Hence, that's why if you get a very rare name, it's highly unlikely to be historically accurate because it will be very highly unlikely to have happened. I'm also going to discuss surnames. Surnames can be separated into patronymic, occupational, habitational, characteristics, and geographical. Patronymic means a surname that is connected to a father. Occupational is a surname that is connected to a job. Habitational is a surname connected to a place. Characteristic is a surname connected to the characteristics of a person. Geographical is a surname which describes a place. So the first character we're looking at is Mrs. Abbey. She is a character who appears as a housekeeper of Heathfield Manor in volume 29. I originally thought that the name Abbey was actually a first name, and I did some research on that, and then I was just casually discussing it with my dad, and he was like, oh no, that's a surname, and why don't you just look at the surname? And so I decided, I was like, okay, we'll get rid of all this research that I've done on this, and I'll research the surname. So researching the surname, I found it originates from Scotland, and derives from the Old French word abbot, meaning priest. According to Ancestry, the family name is found in US, UK, Canada and Scotland between 1840 and 1920. It's likely the family spread out from Scotland due to the Highland clearance that happened between 1750 and 1860. The clearances occurred as nobles who owned lands in Scotland wanted to improve their lands to increase their income. A famous example of this is the Sutherland clearances. In order to do this, they evicted everyone from their lands and replaced them all with sheep. So there were still some people looking after the sheep. Basically, they depleted the population significantly. Hence, that's why there's like 50 million people in England today, but there's only like 10 million, I think, in Scotland because of the clearances where basically everyone was forced to move out. North and West Scotland were both particularly badly hit by the clearances. My granddad actually lives where the Sutherland clearances took place, and you can still see the remains of like settlements where they used to be, which is really creepy when you go and look at them. And like they normally have like a board telling you what families used to live there and stuff, and how many people would have lived there. And there's just like random settlements just scattered around the place because obviously they were just told to basically get out. Anyway, going back to the surname, I have found basically that it would have been historically accurate. So yay! Character number 2 that I looked at is Alistair Chamber. He is the Viscount of Druitt and is a reoccurring character. I don't know if they meant to spell the character's name, because they spell the character's name Alister, but I feel like the character's name should really be spelled Allistar or Alasdair, as those both are very common in Scotland. Alistair, spelt the way they've spelt it, just never appears. Like, I've never seen that spelling before. I don't know if they've just accidentally misspelt it. The name Alistair is a Gaelic version of Alexander, which is very popular in the Victorian period. The surname Chamber does not appear to have been used. Instead, Chambers was far more regularly used, and it is an occupational surname for a servant in a bedroom of a nobleman. So there's 2 different problems there with that name. Alexis Leon Midford, he is the head of the Midford house, the uncle of the CLs that we previously talked about, the husband of Francis, and the father to Edward and Elizabeth. Alexis is part of the Order of the Garter, and his name means helper or defender in Greek. The name is not popular at all in the Victorian England. However, if it was changed to Alexander, it would be far more ideal and far more historically accurate. The last name Midford comes from the place name Midford in Northumberland and means ford at the junction of 2 rivers. These 2 rivers, the River Font and the River Wansbeck. The last name was first used in 1196. Aloise Trancey, he is the Earl of Trancey and appears in the 2nd season of the anime that many fans do not speak of today. The season 2, any characters that appear in that, some people like them, but like season 2 is just generally hated by the fandom. He has his own demon butler, Cloud Faustus, and seeks to kill Sebastian. Aloise's name does not appear in the list of popular Victorian names. On Wikipedia, it is noted as an Old Odsitican form of the name Louis. The name Louis is in the name of the list of Victorian popular names. Hence, if we changed it to Louis, it would be far more historically accurate. The name Louis hovers around between 57 and 96 in the rankings between the 50 years. Before Aloise became the adopted son of the previous Earl, he had the name Jim Mackin. Jim is a very popular name in the Victorian period. The name hovers around rankings 120 and 150 for the 50-year period. And the surname Mackin is an Anglicized form of the Old Gaelic name MacCanna. Canna means wolf cub and Mac means son of, so it's basically means son of wolf cub. Character number 5, Baron Angelina Dallas Burnett. She is known as Madame Red by many for her red hair and her red eyes, and for wearing lots of red. She is the aunt of the CLs and sister of Rachel, their mother. In the manga, she is revealed to be responsible for the Jack the Ripper murders. She was helped by Grell the Grim Reaper in these murders. Angelina is a popular name in the Victorian period, making it historically accurate. And between 1850 and 1880, the name became popular, but it later fell out of use. The surname Dallas, there was a place called Dallas in Moray, and it originates meaning meadow. Annie, she appears within the same volume as Mrs. Abbey, and is one of the new maids at Heathfield Manor. Annie is a very popular name in the Victorian England, sitting at number 3 in girls' names by 1900. Arnold Trancey, he appears with Aloise Trancey in the 2nd season of the anime. He is the brother of Aloise's adopted father. His name increases in popularity over 50 years, rising by 86 places. Arthur Conan Doyle, a reference to the real Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. In the manga, he is a struggling author, which is historically correct with the time, which is March 1889. By that point, he'd only had one of his works published, and that was A Study in Scarlet in 1887. His next published work was The Sign of the Four, which wasn't unpublished until February 1890. He is invited to the manor to stay with several other guests when a murder occurs. Arthur is an extremely popular name between 1850 and 1900, remaining in the top 20 throughout. Arthur Randall, he is the police commissioner of Scotland Yard and frequently condemns how other CL completes for Queen Victoria. He frequently appears when other CL is investigating a case. As previously mentioned, the name Arthur is very, very popular. So it's kind of very apt that there's two Arthurs that appear in the manga because it is such a popular name. The surname Randall derives from Old Norse and Old English and has several different meanings. It can mean shield wolf, the rim of a shield, wolf, and sword. Historically, during the Jack the Ripper cases, Jack Monroe was actually Scotland Yard's police commissioner from 1888 to 1890 and was succeeded by Colonel Sir Edward Bradford, who was commissioner from 1890 to 1903. So it doesn't make any sense why they changed the person. They could have just had two different people appear and, you know. Character number 10 is Beast. She is part of the circus arc and is an animal tamer who performs with her tiger called Betty. She goes under the name Beast when performing, but her real name is Mally. She was born without her left leg and receives an artificial leg from the doctor. She seems to be in love with Joker, but he does not seem to return the affection. Mally does not appear in the list of popular Victorian names. Similarly as well, Beast doesn't either. Her mother's name, Amelia, does appear in the list. In 1850, it was highly popular, ranking at 25, and by 1900, it ranks at 74. This is the end of my first video of the series. I would have to say I'm really annoyed that they didn't name Arthur Randall James Monroe. You know, because it just doesn't make sense why they didn't just try and make it a bit historically accurate. Like, we can just look this stuff up and find out what it actually was. I am very impressed with the dating for Black Butler, as volume 2 is dated to 1888 when the Jack Ripper case happened, and by volume 9 they've gone to 1889, and that is when Arthur Conan Doyle appears. So I'm really surprised that they've done all this research, obviously, to make that the time period correct. But then they've decided not to call the guy Arthur Randall James Monroe. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I understand they might have not wanted to then have to change the character of the police commissioner after a bit. But, like, they could have just made it into the plot, you know, why he suddenly got changed. I'm also really curious as to why Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would have, like, I don't think he would be known by nobility by that point, before he become a well-known writer. He came from England and relied on financial support from his wealthier uncles to study medicine. There was a general interest in Scotland at the time period. Romanticism was a major movement that peaked between 1800 and 1850, and it helped to reform the English population's idea of Scotland and the people living there. Previously, Scotland was seen as a very backward country with very backward people living there, and it was seen as a major drain on England. Sir Walter Scott particularly was very important in reforming the idea of Scotland through his writings. And this movement did allow for more Scottish writers to become more prominent and seen more positively. But I don't think it would have, Arthur had only written one book, I don't think it would have made sense for him to be then known by the Phantom Hive family and then to be requested to come and stay at their place. It just doesn't make any sense why he would then suddenly go there. Yeah, he'd still be very relatively unknown in 1889, so it doesn't really make sense why he's just suddenly turned up. That's the only problem I have. Like, I just don't see why Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would be there. It just didn't make any sense. I know they wanted to have like a nice little nod to the history, but it just didn't make any sense. And they were doing a murder arc as well, so you know, and and they ended up doing like a load of other characters that were like nods to his writings and everything, but it just still didn't make sense why he'd be that. Like, they needed to have him come a bit later. They should have just done if they really wanted to have him in the murder arc, they should have just done it a bit later when he was a bit more well known. Anyway, have a good day, take care, bye.